37th Circuit Court is now in session with the Honorable Brian K. Kirkham presiding. It is Monday, August 5th, 2024 at 10:58 a.m. And this is case number 2024-1540 PP. Jeremy Johnson versus Kelly Johnson, attorneys Capture for the plaintiff and Smith for the defendant.
Good morning to all of you. Court will note that this matter is before the court on the defendant's motion to terminate the personal protective order. With that, Ms. Smith, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
And Ms. Capture?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Ms. Smith, do you wish to make an opening statement or proceed to proofs?
Proceed to proofs.
And Ms. Capture, do you wish to make an opening statement, reserve your opening statement, or waive your opening statement?
Your Honor, I would request that I make a short opening statement.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you, Your Honor. First and foremost, I would just like to notify the court that the respondent's answer to petitioner's personal protective order fails to comply with MCR 3.707A, which requires that the renotice of a motion to terminate occur within 14 days and stipulate good cause as to the reason for any delay of that motion being heard. This answer was originally filed I believe June 4th. We're over 60 days to the hearing of this, and each refiling of this motion or answer, as it's written on the paperwork, has failed to state any good cause as to the reason why it is being delayed. Furthermore, Your Honor, specifically within the answer, respondent states that the allegations in petitioner's request for a personal protective order are essentially true. She states that she did get out of the vehicle on that specific day that she drove past petitioner while he was walking the dog. I will note that that was very late at night on a street that had no lights. There was no reason for respondent to get out of a vehicle. Petitioner but was by himself on the side of the road. And she states even within her answer that she did in fact get out of the vehicle. She states that there's, the allegations themselves didn't occur, that she didn't strike or pull Mr. Johnson's necklace off of him. However, the incident alone, being late at night, randomly stopping next to essentially could have been a stranger, and then getting out of the vehicle to confront my client, that alone reaches a reasonable cause for a person to have an apprehension of violence. And so, Your Honor, I would request that the motion to terminate be dismissed and we close this matter.
Okay, Ms. Capture, I didn't write down the first, you relied upon, was it the court rule or the statute as it relates to the hearing time?
The court rule, MCR 3.707A. It's also stated in the statute under MCL 600.295013.
Yeah, that's what I had, the statute. I just was wondering what you did as far as the court rule. Ms. Smith, what's your response?
Yes, Your Honor. So in terms of the filing of the motion was filed properly after Ms. Capture put in her appearance. There were several times where dates and times did not work for either myself or Ms. Capture to have this hearing. We scheduled the hearing as quickly as we could on a date and time that worked for both of counsel. And we have emails between Attorney Capture and myself stating that originally we wanted to try and schedule for the 29th of July or possibly the 22nd. Both of those dates did not work for Attorney Capture, so we went with the next time that was available for both of us.
Okay. Ms. Capture, is that accurate that they tried to schedule it at an earlier time and then attempted to accommodate your schedule?
Your Honor, that's simply not true. We did accommodate my schedule, I believe, once, but ultimately, this was set for the 5th. Randomly, I got 2 messages,
Fifth of what?
August,
Okay.
today's date. I got 2 messages from Miss Smith that this was being renoticed, for no reason. And that is when when it originally got renoticed, I had told her this date doesn't work for me. And then it was then renoticed again. And I believe it's been renoticed 3 times now. One of those times I did request that it be set for a different date and time. But other than that, it simply has just been renoticed without a reason.
Okay. Well, what the court notes is that the statute and the court rule does state in these particular matters that it says it shall schedule a hearing on the motion within 14 days of the filing of the motion to modify or rescind. In this particular case, the court will note that it was noticed within 14 days of the again of the motion to modify or rescind. However, that didn't work for some reason and had to be renoticed. The court's not going to find that that's a violation of the statute or a court rule if the parties, for various reasons, have to renotice as it was noticed within the appropriate time. So the court's going to deny the motion to dismiss in this matter. Ms. Smith, you can proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like
Call your first witness.
to call Ms. Kelly Johnson.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Johnson, we're going to take some testimony from you. So if you would raise your right hand, be sworn in, and then we'll proceed.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Smith. Anytime.
Ms. Johnson, do you recall an incident occurring on May 21st of 2024 between you and Mr. Jeremy Johnson, wherein you drove past his home?
Yes.
And Ms. Johnson, can you tell the court the reasoning for why you drove past his home at that late of an hour?
We had a counseling appointment.
Ma'am, you're going to have to speak up. Don't turn your head away from the camera because we can't hear you.
We had a counseling appointment at 8 o'clock with Margaret Hunter until 9 o'clock. And my niece had come to my house and picked to visit, and I ended up riding back with her to her house. And Devin, my boyfriend, picked me up after he got out of work at 11 o'clock. And we were on our way home, and I told Devin to drive by the house because I was hoping the kids weren't there by themselves, as they usually are. And when we drove by, Jeremy was standing there in the woods.
Now, Ms. Johnson, you stated that you had a counseling appointment from 8 to 9. Who was the counseling appointment with? You said we just want you to specify as to who was involved with the counseling appointment.
It was me and our 2 boys, Ricky and Sean.
And you stated that your boyfriend picked you up at 11 o'clock?
He got out of work at 11 o'clock and he came over to Logan and Kyler's after he got out of work.
And after he picked you up from your niece's home, you decided to drive past Mr. Johnson's home to see if your children were home alone.
Yes.
How far does your niece live from Mr. Johnson?
Probably about 2 miles.
So when you and your boyfriend drove down the road where you saw Mr. Johnson, did you see him on the road as you were driving down, or when did you see Mr. Johnson on the side of the road?
We were coming around the property. There's 40 acres. And on the back side of the property, as you come around the corner, he was standing on the property in the tall grass.
And what was the reason that you and your boyfriend stopped your vehicle on the side of the road?
As we were driving by, we made eye contact, me and Jeremy, and he flipped me off. And we drove past, and I told Devin to turn the truck around.
What was your level of visibility on that evening to make eye contact with Mr. Johnson?
I could see him very clearly, that it was him.
And you said that he flipped you off,
Yes,
and that is what initiated the stop of the truck.
that's why I told Devin to turn around.
And what happened when Devin turned the truck around?
I got out of the car and I walked over to the side of the road, and I told Jeremy to quit fucking with me and my kids.
And what was Mr. Johnson's response?
He leaned back with a joint in his hand and hit his joint and said, "What are you gonna do about it?"
And what happened after he made that statement?
Devin got out of the truck and said, "We're not gonna do anything with you on your property."
During this incident, did you ever put your hands on Mr. Johnson or make any threats towards him?
Not whatsoever. There was no physical contact whatsoever.
Did you have anything in your hand to physically hurt him? Did you have any car keys, a flashlight, anything that could possibly cause harm to him?
No, I had nothing in my hand.
And once again, did you make any physical contact with Mr. Johnson?
No,
Did you yank the necklace off of his neck?
no.
After Devin got out of the car, what did you do?
Devin got out of the car and Jeremy walked out into the road, let go of the dog, and the dog went towards Devin, jumped on him like she normally does, nipped at him like she normally does when she's greeting someone. And Devin said, "Get your fucking dog." And I grabbed Kyra by the collar, the dog, and stood there as Jeremy had his fist in the air and was circling around Devin and me. I was in front of him at that point, and I got behind Jeremy, and Jeremy said, "Do you box?" to Devin, and Devin said, "Yeah, I box." And they continued to circle each other while I was sitting there holding the dog by the collar, standing there.
So during this incident, Mr. Johnson had his dog with him. Was the dog on a leash?
The dog's not on a leash.
And what kind of dog was it?
She's a German Shepherd.
While you were having a conversation with Mr. Johnson, where was the dog? Had the dog went over to Devin yet, or where was the dog in proximity to you and Mr. Johnson?
He was holding on to the dog's collar off of the side of the road, and I was standing in the road
And when did he let the dog go?
as he was walking out into the road.
So after Mr. Johnson asked Devin what he was going to do, he began to walk into the road? Mr. Johnson?
Yes,
And was he holding on to the dog the entire time he walked out into the road?
no.
How did the altercation end while you were holding the dog? How did things end?
Jeremy and Devin were circling each other and kind of half circles, and Jeremy looked at me and like he was gonna get the dog, and I said, fucking hit me one last time. I fucking dare you. And I let go of the dog and he grabbed her by the collar and he turned around and walked up the street.
So did Mr. Johnson make any threats towards you?
No,
So would you say that it was you and Devin who ended the altercation or Mr. Johnson?
I would say Mr. Jeremy, I mean, he walked away from the situation.
And did you make any threats towards him?
No,
Do you recall an incident that happened in December of 2023?
at the football game or
A phone conversation between you and Mr. Johnson?
yes,
And when did that phone conversation occur?
as far as
To the best
time-
of your memory?
timeline in December. I'm not even sure the date.
To your knowledge, do you believe that it was in December or in another month?
Oh, yeah, I don't even know what the date was.
And so just to kind of jog your memory, I'm referring to a phone conversation where Mr. Johnson alleges that there were some threats made over the phone.
And I don't know. There was not. I don't recall what the date was.
But do you recall the phone conversation?
I do. I recorded the phone conversation.
And in the phone conversation, did you make any threats towards Mr. Johnson?
No,
What was the phone conversation about?
Objection, Your Honor, I'm having the difficulty of understanding relevance. The incident alleged on my client's verified statement for the personal protection order was he was receiving constant texts from Kelly, ended up blocking her number. There's no phone conversation that we're talking about, and so I'm wondering what the relevance of any given phone conversation may have on this
Okay,
particular incident.
Ms. Smith, what's the relevance?
Well, Your Honor, I am laying the foundation that Mr. Johnson did not have Ms. Johnson blocked in December of 2023, as he alleged on his PPO, that there were many text conversations exchanged between them and telephone conversations, wherein he did not have her number blocked.
Well, I think you can get into that without trying to get into any substance of it, as that it wouldn't be relevant because it wasn't included in the petition. So I will sustain the objection, move on.
Ms. Johnson, do you recall having text conversations with Mr. Johnson in December of 2023?
I had text conversations, yes.
And how often would you say that you and Mr. Johnson texted?
Whenever it was concerning getting the kid, I mean, it was on a weekly basis, I would say at least.
During any time in December of 2023, did you have any reason to believe that your number was blocked from Mr. Johnson's telephone?
No,
Did you reach out to Mr. Johnson via text in December 2023 for any other reason besides to have conversations about your children?
no,
And do you recall an incident in September of 2023 that occurred at Harper Creek High School?
Yes.
Could you tell us the circumstances surrounding that incident?
We had parents' night where the kids meet. The kids are out warming up for their game, and before the game starts, the parents are to meet behind the student bleachers, and the kids come and meet their parents to walk out on the field and get introduced with their parents. I sat there waiting for Jeremy and Ricky, and they never showed up. Ricky was number 70. And I stood there in line, waiting for them to get through number 70, and they skipped right over his number and went on to the next person. And I went back to the locker room where I seen Sean, our younger son, outside of the locker room, and Randy, Ricky's girlfriend's dad, and John Bolton outside of the locker room. I was really upset, and I said, tell Jeremy to get his bitch ass out here. And I kept walking past the locker room, turned around, stood down there for a little bit, came back, and Randy was saying, I understand what you're going through. I understand what you're going through. And I said, you don't know what I've been through. And we ended up walking towards the gate, and I said, Jeremy's a fucking pussy. And then I said, I hate that word. And I said, I'm leaving to go cool down. And I left. And
Miss Johnson, after you left the football game, well, actually, let's go back to the incidents at the Harper Creek Stadium. While you were calling for Mr. Johnson to come out, did you ever make any threatening comments towards him, or any threats of violence or anything like that towards him to come out of the locker room?
no, I never even yelled for him to come out. I was telling Randy and John to tell Jeremy to get out there.
And so you said you left to go cool down.
Mm-hmm.
And where did you go when you left to cool down?
I went for a drive, and I ended up going back to my house, our marital home, and I was looking for my extra set of car keys that Jeremy still continues to not give back to me. And I went back. I went and looked in his truck, and I went into the top of the garage and looked in the drawers and on the countertop.
While you were looking for this extra set of car keys, did you destroy any of the property in the home? Did you make a mess of the garage or any of the property that was located in the home?
No, I never entered the home. I was in the top of the garage. I had stumbled through change in his truck. His truck was there, and so there was change all over the truck. And
Excuse me one moment, ma'am. Ms.
Yeah.
Smith, I'm looking
Yes.
at the petition and I don't see any reference to this particular incident in there. So how is it relevant?
On the petitioner's petition,
Yes.
there is an incident that he alleges that Miss Johnson destroyed a bunch of his items in his garage.
Actually, I can chime in here. Specifically, it says,
Which date?
this is on September 2023. This is the second page of the petition. It says Kelly then proceeded to my house and through all of my personal belongings throughout and through all personal belongings throughout the home.
Okay, go
It
ahead,
doesn't
Ms.
talk-
Smith. I'm
Yep.
sorry, I didn't see that part. I was focusing on the first part at the school.
That's fine. Thank you, Your Honor. So I'm sorry, Ms. Johnson, you can continue if you remember.
So yeah, I knocked change on the floor in the truck. And as I was going around the garage, I was looking on the top of the bench and a bow and arrow fell down, but there was nothing broke. Well, it stated in the police report that nothing was broke.
Just to reiterate, Ms. Johnson, did you go inside of the home?
No,
And you only went inside of the garage?
inside the top of the garage.
And what was the condition of the garage when you entered the garage? As far as, were there things on the ground? Were there things messed around in the garage, or was it intact?
It was intact.
And what was the condition of the garage when you left?
The bow was on the floor. The drawers were probably left open. I don't think I shut the drawers. And beyond that, that was it.
So for the most part, with the exception of the bow, would you say that the garage was intact when you left?
Yes.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Capture, any cross-examination?
Yes, thank you. Miss Johnson, what time, again, can you refresh my memory? What time at night was it when you drove past Mr. Johnson's home?
I believe it was just minutes before midnight.
And Miss Johnson, do you frequently drive past Mr. Johnson's home?
No, not frequently.
And you stated that you had a counseling appointment prior that evening?
Correct.
Was that a pretty emotional counseling appointment?
Yeah, it was emotional.
And so then you had requested that you drive past, to your boyfriend, that you drive past Mr. Johnson's home.
Yes.
And when was the last time you resided in that home?
June 20th of 2023.
So it's been over a year since you've resided there?
Correct.
How often do you frequent that home to see your children?
Never.
Would there be any way that you would know if Mr. Jeremy Johnson was in his home with the children or without the children at midnight on any given night?
If his car was there, I would assume he would be home.
And he has a garage, am I correct?
Yes.
And it's plausible that he could park in his garage and that garage door be closed and you not see his vehicle?
He's never parked there in the 9 years that we were together because it's full of stuff.
But you haven't resided there in over a year, is that correct?
That's correct.
And so is it correct for me to say that you had no reason to be driving past that home?
No,
And why is it not correct?
because I was concerned for my kids being left home alone all the time while he's sitting at the bar.
How old are your children?
My boys are 14 and 17.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, did you have any reason to stop the vehicle and turn around and confront Mr. Johnson?
Yes,
And what reason was that?
because I wanted to tell him to quit fucking with me and my boys.
And do you believe, as a person equally situated, if you were on the side of the road walking your dog and a car stopped and confronted you, that you would be in a sense of fear?
He was not on the side of the road walking the dog. He was on his property walking the dog.
That is not what I just asked you, Ms. Johnson. Can you please answer the question?
Well,
Do you need me to rephrase it?
Please.
If you were walking in the middle of the night and someone stopped their vehicle next to you and got out of that vehicle, do you believe that you would have a sense of fear?
Oh, yeah. If it was somebody I didn't know.
Ms. Johnson, you state in your answer that you did not get out of the vehicle until your boyfriend exited the vehicle. Is that correct?
No, I was out of the vehicle first.
So your answer in your motion is wrong?
I got out of the vehicle. Answering what, I got out of the vehicle before Devin did. I don't know where you got that I didn't.
It states in your motion. Ms. Johnson, was there a reason for you to get out of the vehicle?
Yes,
Can you explain why?
because I wanted to tell Jeremy to quit fucking with me and my kids.
So your boyfriend's car window was broken and it could not roll down and you could not say that outside of the window?
I was on the other side of the car. And Devin's window was up. I did not have the whatever to roll down his window. No, I got out of the car.
Ms. Johnson, was Jeremy Johnson holding a flashlight?
No, he had a joint and the dog.
And were there any street lamps on this street in the middle of the night?
No,
Ms. Johnson, did you approach Mr. Johnson without him asking you to approach him?
I walked around the vehicle and I would say, yeah, I approached him. I mean, I walked
And
the vehicle towards him.
you state that you didn't have on your person any kind of flashlight or anything like that?
No,
And Ms. Johnson, is it your recollection that you were still texting Mr. Johnson in December?
yes,
And what about January? Did you guys continue having text and phone conversations?
we had phone conversation, text up until the day that, and I can't tell you that date, but up until the date that we separated the assets were separated. I picked up the stuff at 6 Mile House. I let him know that I wasn't able to put the garage door down and I didn't take the garbage and or the couch, which was garbage, and that I would be getting a garbage dumpster that we could put it into at a later date. That was the last known text that we ever had.
Did he respond to that message?
I don't think he did, if I recall correctly.
And you state that you did indeed approach the locker room in September of 2023?
I walked to the locker room, yeah. I approached the locker room.
And you stated that you used obscenities while you were approaching the locker room or talking to individuals around at a high school event?
I would say I used cuss words.
I'm sorry, can you restate that?
I swore, I mean obscenities, I swore.
Thank you.
There
And
was-
then you admit that you entered the marital home, at least through the garage?
I went into the garage, correct?
Is the garage attached to the marital home?
No,
It is a detached garage?
correct.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Okay, anything else, Ms. Smith?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Johnson, you stated that you last resided in the marital home in June 23.
Yes,
And on the date of the incident concerning the drive-by of the home to check on your children, were you and Mr. Johnson still legally married?
yes. Just a few days after that, the judgment was signed.
Were there any restraining orders or stipulations that stated that you were not allowed to go to the marital home?
No,
So you were within your full rights to go to the marital home.
correct.
And then in terms of stopping the truck, when you drove past Mr. Johnson, would you have stopped the truck if Mr. Johnson had not flipped you off?
No, we were already going by. I didn't have any intentions on seeing him walking around at midnight, and we were just driving by. He was home. I was wanting to know that somebody was there with my kids. And no, I don't think we would have stopped.
So, Ms. Johnson, it would be safe to say that had not Mr. Jeremy Johnson instigated the situation, you would not have stopped.
Correct.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Anything else, Ms. Capture?
I would like to call my client, Your Honor.
Okay, well, I'll check with Ms. Smith,
Oh,
see if she has
sorry.
any other witnesses. Ms. Smith, do you have any other witnesses?
Your Honor, I do have an additional witness, but if it is okay with the court, I would request a brief recess to check in on a motion hearing with Judge Jackinet.
Well, we advised Judge Jackinet that you're down here doing this.
Okay.
So I want to get this over and I'm not going to grant the recess. Go ahead.
That's fine, thank you, Your Honor. I would like to call Mr. Devin Dast.
Okay, okay. Sarah, what we're going to do is take some testimony from you. So if you would raise your right hand, we'll have you sworn in and then we'll proceed.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Sir, would you state your full name and spell your last name?
Devin Wayne Dast, Daoust.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Dast, what is your relation to Miss Kelly Johnson?
She is my girlfriend.
And do you know Mr. Jeremy Johnson?
Just through the few encounters we've had.
Do you recall an incident that occurred in May of 2024, where you picked Miss Johnson up from her niece's home and took her to drive past Mr. Johnson's home to check on her children?
I do.
And just from your recollection, could you just kind of explain to the court what happened?
Your
when
Honor,
you-
I hate to object here, but I was not under the understanding that Mr. Dast was in the room the entire time that Miss Johnson testified. I did not realize, otherwise I would have. I feel like his testimony is going to be unfairly prejudiced by the fact that he just heard the entire testimony. We were never informed that he was even in the room.
Well, Ms. Capture, you did not make a motion to sequester witnesses, and it'd be no different if they're in a courtroom and somebody's in the pews and in the back, and you don't raise the issue. You're kind of don't have that opportunity to do it after the fact. So presumably you're making a motion to again sequester or eliminate the testimony of Mr. Dast, and I'm going to deny that. Go ahead, Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Dast, just once again, could you inform the court of how you perceive the events of the incident in May of 2024 to have gone? What was the reason that you and Miss Johnson drove past Mr. Johnson's home?
I was working night shift at the time. I got out at 11. And she was over her nieces, who happens to be with my best friend. And so I went over there to pick her up. And after we had left, she had asked me if I would drive down to see if the children were left on their own.
And as the two of you were driving down the road, did you see Mr. Johnson on the side of the road or?
He was not on the road, he was 10 to 15 foot onto his property coming out through the woods. But yes, I did see him
And what caused you to stop your truck in the road?
when he had flipped us off, and I went up and I turned the truck around.
And did you see Miss Johnson get out of the truck?
I
Did you-
did.
Did you see Miss Johnson with any objects in her hand that could potentially cause harm to Mr. Johnson?
I did not.
Did Mr. Johnson have anything in his hand?
Just a joint and a dog.
Did you witness Miss Johnson put her hands on Mr. Johnson or use any other object to injure him?
She did not.
At any point, did Mr. Johnson step into the road?
He did.
At what point was that?
She had opened her door and walked just to the front of the hood of the truck and had told him to stop fucking with her and the kids. And he had said things to her, and I had rolled my window down and also told him to stop fucking with her and the kids and to leave the children out of it. And that was when he had, stated, what are you guys gonna do about it? And I had told him, I'm not coming onto your property, I'm not. And it was at that point, he let his dog go and he stepped to the road. He didn't have to come, he had already walked out of his own property.
So Mr. Johnson stepped off of his property into the road and then let his dog go?
Yes,
And what happened when he let the dog go?
the dog did jump and nip on me. Did nip me in the arm, and that is when Kelly grabbed the dog. And Jeremy was, ready to fight at that point, and so I got in the position to fight as well.
When you say that Mr. Johnson was ready to fight at that point, what made you believe that he was ready to fight?
His arms were in the air circling, getting ready to box.
And during this entire incident, did you ever witness Miss Johnson put her hands on Mr. Johnson or take something off of his neck or hit
No.
him with anything?
No,
Did you have a flashlight in your truck?
I do not.
Mr. Dust, were you present during the September incident in 2023 at the Harper Creek Football Stadium?
I was going to take pictures of Kelly and her son.
And do you recall hearing Miss Johnson make any threats or allegations of threats towards Mr. Johnson while he was in the locker room?
Threats? No. Cursing? Yes.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, Ms. Capture, any cross?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Doust, when exactly did you get out of the vehicle?
After I had also stated that he leave the kids out of this situation. And he kept asking me what I was gonna do about it, and I wasn't gonna do anything, I wouldn't do nothing. Antagonizing me to come onto his property. And so I'd opened my door, never came towards him, put a foot on the ground, and said, I'm not coming on your fucking property. And so he came to us, which was more than a step away. It wasn't just 1 footstep to step to the road.
So you decided to open the door and get out of the vehicle and join Kelly?
No, I had 1 foot on the ground, 1 foot on the step of my truck.
So your door was all the way open or was it slightly open?
Slightly open at this point.
And so when the dog got out of my client's control and jumped on you, how, if the door was just slightly open and you were still in the vehicle, how did it jump on you and bite you?
Once he had started to approach the road to confront, I fully got out of the vehicle, yes. And that is when he let go of the dog.
So you exited completely the vehicle, you shut your door, you met with Miss Johnson at the front of the vehicle, and you and she presented essentially unified front in front of my client?
No, I don't know where you gather that. Me and your client met, not me and Kelly. I don't know where you gather that Kelly and I joined.
Well, Kelly
Yeah.
was close enough to grab the dog, correct?
Correct, but she also called the dog. It was at one time for however many years her dog as well.
Okay. Did you also raise your hands to Mr.
Did I
Johnson?
put in a defensive position? Yes, I absolutely did.
Did you make any threatening remarks to Mr. Johnson?
I did not.
If you were on the side of the road on your own property and someone stopped their vehicle, turned around and came and confronted you, would you be able to, have a sense of fear or apprehension?
No,
So you would be fine in the middle of the night for someone who was a stranger essentially to just pull up on your property?
yeah. I'm not, I don't, yeah.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Okay, Ms. Smith, any additional redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dowds, that would conclude your testimony. Thank you. You're free to go. Have a good day.
Thank you, sir.
Any other witnesses, Ms. Smith?
Yes, Your Honor, I would like to call Mr. Jeremy Johnson.
Okay. Mr. Johnson, we'll have you raise your right hand, be sworn in. We'll proceed.
Sir, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Smith.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, how long had you and Ms. Johnson been married prior to the divorce proceedings?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Yeah, what's the relevance, Ms. Smith?
I will just strike that. I'll move forward.
Okay.
Mr. Johnson, do you recall the incidents that happened in May of this year on your property and near
I
your
do.
property?
I do.
And you heard Ms. Johnson and Mr. Dowse testify that you were walking on the side of the road with your dog on your property?
Yes.
When you saw their truck approach, did you indeed give Ms. Johnson the middle finger?
No.
How did the incident occur to your recollection?
So I was walking back to my house with my dog. It's dark, there's no lights, right? So I hear a car coming from the north. So I call Kyra to me, I grab by her collar and I step off the road 2 paces, 3 paces maybe, to let the car pass. Car comes around the corner, drives past at a high rate of speed, slams on the brakes and does a wild 3-point turn, crashes up over the bank and drives up on me. And then they jumped out. I'm standing there in the weeds with my dog.
So, Mr. Johnson, what you're saying is that you were walking in the road with your dog and the truck came down the road. Did
So I
a
stood
wide,
off, so I stood off the side of the road so I didn't get run over on a dark dirt road. So I was off probably 2 paces into the tall grass. Standing there holding my dog by the collar till the car passed.
and then you said both Mr. Dowse and Ms. Johnson jumped out of the car.
Yes, drove up on me, slammed on the brakes. They both jumped out of the car.
And
She came around the front of the truck. And he was hollering at this point. and they like crossed where she ended up on my right. And he was more directly in front of me. When the whole confrontation went down, they were like coming like to circle me and circle me is what I thought. And I'm just standing there in the grass still at that point.
Were you holding your dog at this point?
I was.
And did you see any weapon or object in Miss Johnson's hand?
I did. Looked like a flashlight.
And you stated that it was dark, there were no street lights.
It was, but when she crossed, when he got out, his doors open and his truck was still on. All his cab lights were going, so it lit the street up right there. And when they crossed in front of me, I seen it in her hand.
And at any time, did this alleged flashlight that you saw in her hand, did she turn it on?
No.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. Any thing miscaptured? You want to do any direct at this point?
I would like to do some direct with my client.
Okay, go ahead.
Jeremy, do you typically take walks at night with your dog?
I do.
Can you explain to the court why that is?
Well, as of late, it's been 100 degrees outside and I got a black German Shepherd, so nighttime is the best time to walk her because it's not so hot.
And
Trouble
what-
getting to sleep. And that night was no different because I was stressed out about the counseling meeting earlier in the day because the boys were upset when they got home.
And did you have any conversations with Miss Johnson prior to her confronting you that night?
No,
And did you have your phone on you while you were walking the dog that night?
I did not.
Did you have any flashlight with you that night?
No,
You stated that the vehicle was traveling north. Was it coming from behind you or in front of you?
the vehicle was coming from the north, headed south.
So does that mean that the headlights were facing you directly on or?
Correct.
And so could you see what kind of vehicle was approaching?
No,
And you said the vehicle was at a high rate of speed.
yes,
Do you believe that was, a typical vehicle at that time of night on your road? Could have been any vehicle.
yes.
Did you make any gestures or anything towards the vehicle as it was approaching you?
No.
Didn't raise your hands or anything?
So I may have had my hand up to the side of my face to block the lights from my eyes so as not to throw my night vision off.
Did the vehicle have its high beams on or low beams?
I would assume high beams out there, but again, I don't know. I wasn't looking directly into the truck lights.
When the vehicle passed by, how quickly did it come to a stop?
Pretty much immediate, probably within 50 foot.
So it was a screeching halt?
Yes,
And you stated that they did a quick turn around.
yes.
At this point, can you explain to the court how you were feeling?
I was pretty confused and going through all the scenarios in my head about what's going on. Who could this possibly be pulling up on me like this?
Would you say to the court that you were in a state of, fear or apprehension?
Yeah, I was getting ready to take off running into the woods, yeah.
And then when the car approached you and Kelly exited the vehicle, how did you feel?
I was in a state of shock. I thought I might have been dreaming.
And then you stated very quickly after or almost simultaneously that Mr. Dowse also exited his vehicle.
Yes,
And then they approached you
yes,
and they surrounded you.
yes, till about halfway in the road, I would say. Because I had told them, hey, I got my dog. Yeah. And they had stopped, but she was on my right, he was on my left.
Right. And why did you let them know that you had your dog with you?
Because I don't want my dog biting anybody.
And could you imagine that your dog would bite someone in the middle of the night who was approaching you?
Yes, my dog is protective, and if we would have gotten to a scuffle, she would have reacted.
And Mr. Dowson and Miss Johnson stated multiple times that you had released the dog. Can you explain to the court what occurred during that altercation?
So I did. So when they were out of the truck, yelling, egging me into the road, trying to get me to fight, they were out of their minds.
So can you explain what you mean by egging you into the road?
Yeah, telling me to put the dog up, come onto the road. I'm not going to come onto your property. And I was trying to tell them I don't have a leash. And they just weren't hearing that, kept on it yelling. And so finally at that point, I did walk into the road to get better footing. Because I thought I was going to have to defend myself. I thought I better get to some better footing, right? Not standing in the grass on some sticks that I was on. And I come into the road. And then at that point, thought I was going to have to defend myself. So that's when I released Kyra. And Kelly called Kyra, the dog, over to her and grabbed her by her collar.
Can you explain to the court why you felt you needed to defend yourself?
Well, from their actions, they were pretty wound up and out of control, and just the whole encirclement deal and just the words and just everything going on. I mean,
What kind of words were they using?
I'm gonna kick your ass. I mean, a number of phrases. I don't recall all this particulars. Like I said, I was in pretty much never land at that point, trying to figure out what's going on.
And you recall Miss Johnson saying to stop fucking with her and her kids?
I don't recall hearing that until I was walking away.
Okay.
So she may have said it earlier on. I don't recall.
All right. Did you ever, say to Mr. Douse, can you box or do you want to box
No.
or something around those lines?
No.
Did he ever threaten you with boxing?
Yes. So at a point we did kind of like square up, right? And he came in with his hands up. So I did the same thing, thinking it was going down, right? And the whole circle, and yeah, the headlights are in my face. So I circled out of the lights. And then that went on for, couldn't have been too long, maybe 15 seconds or so. And I was like, I gotta go. I gotta get out of here. And at that point, he was to the north of me. And I had to go south to get home. And she was south of me holding the dog. So I started walking south. And that's when she approached me.
And what occurred when she approached you?
She came up to me and smacked me across my face. So I had a backwoods cigar in my mouth, not a joint. It was a cigar. And she smacked out my mouth. And I remember that because I thought that was kind of weird. I still had that in my mouth. But she smacked that out of my mouth. And then she reached up and ripped my chain off my neck. And then she started howling, something about going to kick my ass with my own flashlight. And she commencing to trying to tussle with me, right? As I was trying to break south. And so it was at that point I grabbed Kyra because she came up. And also I knew she had a flashlight because in that tussle she dropped it. And I remember looking down and I could see the outline of a flashlight on the ground. So I grabbed the dog and I'm trying to walk away with the dog by the collar, drag her, and she put her legs around the dog, wasn't letting me take the dog. So I let go and I headed south, headed home, called for my dog and she came.
Mr. Johnson, how often do you talk on the phone to Miss Johnson?
Have not.
When do you think, was the last time you talked on the phone with her?
Well, after hearing her testimony about the last texts over the property split, I would have to agree it was at that time. I had said December, right? Because I kind of remembered, I guess, snow on the ground. So now the day she picked everything up, there was snow. I mean, I didn't.
Do you remember when about that time was?
So that would have been March,
Okay,
I believe,
so,
when the property split was.
so from the date of March forward, did you then block Miss Johnson from your phone?
Yes,
And then Mr. Johnson, you recall the incidents from September with Miss Johnson?
yes.
And can you explain to the court what occurred on that date?
Yeah, so there was parents' night with the kids. And I coach. And so me and my oldest, so we'd had to talk about parents' night. It was still pretty new after, the split, and I was still pretty emotional at that time, and I wasn't in a position to walk out there. And I didn't know how Ricky felt, so I had approached him and asked him. And he wasn't sure if he wanted to do it, so I left it up to him. He told coach we're not going out, so we didn't go out. Parent time, kids are out there, we go to the locker room, change out Ricky's cleats. And as when we were in the locker room, I heard yelling and screaming and hollering, and I was in there with both my boys, Ricky and Sean. And so I walked out to the edge of the door, and that's when I knew it was her. So I just stayed in the locker room. And so I didn't really get to hear what all she was saying. I know she was screaming wildly and cussing and swearing and having words with Randy. And then later that evening, when I got home, my truck had been cleaned out and the upstairs garage had been gone through pretty good. Stuff thrown about, nothing broke, but just stuff, drawers emptied and stuff thrown on the ground.
And Mr. Johnson, did she ask to go over to the house?
No,
Had she been on the property since the date that she separated from you?
yes. So me and the boys had went to Florida for a trip, and at that point she was at the house.
And when was that?
Would have been in July, mid-July.
Had she been in the house since the July date?
I don't believe so.
Was she ever invited into the home?
No,
Was she prohibited from being in the home?
no,
Did you ever ask her not to come into the house?
no,
But she did not reside in the home during that time period?
no.
Did she have any personal property at the house at that time?
Very little, if any.
So she didn't have any reason to enter the home?
No,
When you were in the locker room, can you state your feelings and why you did not walk out and confront Miss Johnson?
I didn't. I didn't want any more of a scene being created than there already was, or at a football game. And I was trying to distract my boys so as to they did not know that it was her out there yelling and screaming. I told them that it was a crazy fan from Marshall. They asked who was yelling.
Did you have any fear that she might strike you if you exited the locker room?
Yes, I could see that being a possibility.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Okay. Anything else, Ms. Smith?
No, Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Okay. Any further witnesses, Ms. Capture?
I have no further witnesses, Your Honor.
Okay. Looks like we've concluded the testimony then. Ms. Smith, any closing?
Yes, Your Honor. From the testimony, Mr. Johnson has not met the burden of proof to show that there has been repeat or continuing contact between Ms. Johnson and himself to raise to the level of harassment or raise to the level of Mr. Johnson experiencing or suffering emotional distress. Ms. Johnson testified that she did not have an object in her hand and she did not assault Mr. Johnson during the time when she drove past the property to check on her children. Mr. Dast also testified that Ms. Johnson did not have an object in her hand to assault Mr. Johnson, nor did she take anything or snatch anything off his neck or make physical contact with him. Mr. Dast also testified that it was Mr. Johnson, and also Ms. Johnson testified to this, that it was Mr. Johnson who instigated the incident initially when they drove past the home to go check on Ms. Johnson's children. During this time, Ms. Johnson and Mr. Johnson were still married. The home was still the marital property. Ms. Johnson did not need a reason to go to the home during the Harper Creek Parents Night event to go and look for her belongings. There were no restraining orders or any other orders in place saying that she was not allowed to enter the property or the marital home. These are very few instances. There are no allegations of stalking. Ms. Johnson has not had any conversation with Mr. Johnson outside of that regarding her children. Mr. Johnson also testified himself that he did not block Ms. Johnson from his phone until March, when initially in his petition, he stated that he had her blocked in December, which clearly is not true. We would ask that this PPO be terminated on behalf of Mrs. Johnson. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Capture.
Thank you, Your Honor. I believe that respondent's attorney misspoke and that the standard for a domestic relationship PPO is appropriate when the petitioner can demonstrate that the respondent has interfered with the petitioner's personal liberty or caused a reasonable apprehension of fear. Pursuant to case law, People versus Richardson, reasonable cause is shown by facts that would justify a fair-minded person of average intelligence to believe that an incident has occurred. PPOs do not require multiple incidents. However, in this particular case, there are multiple incidents of Miss Johnson acting erratic, harassing my client, and the primary incident in the middle of the night, driving past his home and cornering him with another individual. Any individual could state that that incident alone would put them in a reasonable apprehension of fear. That is pursuant to the statute MCL 62951L. Again, Your Honor, my client has sufficiently presented facts today via his testimony that respondent corroborates by saying that she did, in fact, appear at our petitioner's home in the middle of the night while petitioner did not have anything on his person. He did take hold of his dog, but did not have a weapon, did not have any reason to corner petitioner in the middle of the night with a vehicle. And yet, respondent states that she did just that. She also states that she used vulgar language, which can be construed as threatening, because it's very unlikely that anyone says those terms in a kind manner. This vulgar language also occurred at a high school event in front of the minor children, while my client was trying to prevent those minor children from being exposed to this behavior. Respondent herself admits that she used vulgar language at a high school event, and then admits to the fact that she did drive to the marital home and access the garage. Again, Your Honor, all of these would put any reasonable individual in a state of fear, or that the incident itself did occur. It did. That is the threshold for a PPO. I believe that is satisfied. I do not believe petitioner or respondent has met their burden of proof to terminate this PPO, and we request that their motion be dismissed. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Ms. Smith?
Yes, Your Honor, I would just like to state that words in Michigan not coupled with any action is not enough to put someone in an apprehension of fear. Ms. Johnson did not ever testify to making any actions towards Mr. Johnson on any of these events, the Harper Creek Parents Night event, or in the event with driving past the home, that would cause Mr. Johnson, according to Michigan law, to be put in an apprehension of fear. If she said words, they were not coupled with gestures to put him in a reasonable apprehension of fear. Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, in this case, as in most cases, the court does always look at the issue of credibility. And oftentimes parties will allege that one witness was not truthful or lying. And the court has found that inconsistencies do occur oftentimes when parties are not lying. And there's conflicting testimony will occur based upon a person's background, perception, bias, understanding, and misunderstanding. There were inconsistencies, obviously, in this case, although they were very slight. There were inconsistencies, and I'm not going to go into all those because I don't think they're germane in this particular point. The testimony of the petitioner in this case was that, I'm sorry, the say petitioner of the respondent, not petitioner. She had testified that they were driving down the road approximately midnight on May 21st, 2024, that they saw Mr. Johnson off in the grass or an area on his property, and that she claims that he flipped her off. He claims he had his hand up by his face, was simply shielding himself from the lights. He said he couldn't see the vehicle or who it was or anything of that nature. And at that time, the respondent informed and told her boyfriend to turn the vehicle around. They did turn the vehicle around, got outside of the vehicle. She then proceeded to go up to the petitioner, and that's Mr. Johnson, and informed him, says she's told him, stop fucking with me and my children. The boyfriend then got out of the vehicle, and she claims she never assaulted the petitioner in this particular matter. He states on his testimony that she did, and she also tore a necklace off his neck. But so there were varying, again, renditions of what happened on the May 21st, 2024 date. And that the other incident occurred that really is germane is the one in September of 2023 at the football game, when apparently it's supposed to be parents' night, and the respondent stated she was upset at that point that her son had not come out to be introduced and have the parents' night. She went to the locker room. She said, I was really upset. She then proceeded to yell out. She says, tell petitioner, that's Mr. Johnson, get his bitch ass out here. Again, she made other vulgar and comments at that particular time, as she stated. In these particular matters, the court can grant a personal protective order which would enjoin or restrain certain conduct if the court determines there's reasonable cause to believe that an individual has committed or may commit any of the acts listed under MCL 600.2950 parens 1 parens A through K. Those incidents would include, not be limited to, any placing an individual or threatening them with physical injury, again, assaulting, attacking, beating, molesting, or wounding an individual or any on their property. In this case, also the person could place a person in apprehension, again, of those particular actions. And if the person also engages in stalking behavior, and stalking behavior would encompass, again, confronting a particular person in these particular cases, or again, any other act or conduct which would cause a reasonable apprehension of violence in this particular matter. The miscapture had quoted to People versus Richardson, where that reasonable cause can be shown by facts leading a fair-minded person of average intelligence or judgment to believe that an incident has occurred, as Ms. Capture mentioned, or will occur in this particular case. So it doesn't necessarily have to occur, but it can apprehension that something will occur. Clearly, in this particular matter, the respondent, when she went by and saw the petitioner aside the road at approximately midnight, he could have continued to go on and, in fact, leave the premises, have no altercation. That she chose not to do so, but to tell her boyfriend to turn around, got out of the vehicle, went up to the petitioner at that particular time, and again was vulgar in her contact with him. That he stated when she was coming out of the vehicle that at that point he and the boyfriend was coming out, he stated that he got in a defensive position because he thought he was going to have to defend himself at that particular time. And clearly, if he feels he has to defend himself, that places him in reasonable apprehension of some physical altercation occurring in these particular cases. So the court does believe that there is reasonable cause to believe that individual has committed or may commit any of the acts listed under the applicable statute that I'd referenced before. I think it is appropriate, and I did think it was appropriate at the time to grant the personal protective order, and the court is going to deny the petition to terminate the personal protective order. It will remain and continue throughout the term as stated in that protective order. You're free to go. Have a good day, and hopefully we have no further incidents or altercations.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Let's get the facts straight. She loves a verbal ashtray. Never blowing smoke when she gets pissed. She's quick to castrate. Love her on a good day, love her on a bad day. Either way, she's here to stay, stay, stay. Call up, holy, 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 holy.